This is the first shiur of Hilchot Pesach as a Hachana to Pesach, which is coming up in just under a month. We're just a few days after Purim. And in this first shiur, we're going to want to touch up on 4 topics. So let's start. The first topic we want to touch in this shiur is the chovah, the obligation to learn Hilchot Pesach 30 days before Pesach. So where does it come from? So we have 2 sources in Chazal. The Gemara in Masechet Megillah, Daf Lamed Bet Amud Aleph 32a, describes that there is a takana from Moshe Rabbeinu that Am Yisrael need to learn the halachot of each chag on that chag. Hilchot chag b'chag, Hilchot atzeret be'atzeret, and Hilchot Pesach b'Pesach. Atzeret, of course, is Shavuot, and chag is Sukkot. So that is one source. Another source appears in Masechet Pesachim, Daf Vav Amud Aleph. There, the Gemara introduces the halacha of learning Hilchot Pesach 30 days before Pesach. Where does the Gemara learn this from? From Moshe teaching the halachot of Pesach Sheni on Pesach. Right? We know the Psukim in Chumash B'Midbar describe that the people that were Tme'im, were impure, came to Moshe and said, we can't do Pesach with everyone. What is our solution? And Moshe taught them Pesach Sheni. Okay, so these are the 2 sources. The question that arises is then, why is this a halacha only about Pesach? The first source in Masechet Megillah said that all the chagim, we need to spend time learning the halachot of that chag on the chag itself. And then the Gemara in Pesachim said the Pesach needs 30-day preparation of learning the halachot before. So the Bet Yosef in his commentary to the Torah brings 2 explanations. Explanation number 1 is brought by the Ran, Rabbeinu Nissan, and he says that really 30 days is not a halachic obligation of learning the halachot. Rather, it's a rule of priority. We have a halacha that if 2 people come to the rabbi, to the dayan, and ask a question, the dayan, the rabbi, has to prioritize the question that is relevant to Maaseh. If we're on Shabbat, someone has a question in Hilchot Shabbat, another one has a question in Hilchot Brachot. So the person with the Hilchot Shabbat question should get an answer first. It says the Ran, 30 days before Pesach, questions about Pesach are to be prioritized. The only problem with what the Ran says is that Rashi on the Gemara explains that it's about learning the actual halachot. So we have to be a bit of machloket rishonim. So the first explanation the Bet Yosef brings is accepted by the Ran, but not accepted by Rashi. The Bet Yosef himself brings another explanation, and he says that it's because the Halachot of Pesach are extensive, a lot of details. The tochen and the baking and the hagala and the hachshavat kelim and the wheat for the flour and the bitul, and we're going to see in the next recordings in this other we're going to go through all the halachot, not to very detailed, but at least the klalim. There's a lot of halachot to do with Pesach, and this requires a 30-day lead time. Okay. Whereas other festivals, the other chagim, Shavuot, of course, has hardly any halachot. And even Sukkot, when you break it down, there's a few halachot about the schach, a few halachot about the tfanot, and halachot about each of the 4 species. In a 1-hour shiur, we can go over the fundamental, and someone is prepared for Sukkot. So that's what the Bet Yosef says. The Tzitz Eliezer, in volume 13, which is Chelek Yud Gimel, Siman Aleph, I think, he addresses this explanation by the Bet Yosef, but he says, I don't understand, because the source in the Gemara for this halacha of learning Hilchot Pesach 30 days before is learned from Pesach Sheni. There aren't that many halachot from Pesach Sheni. We don't have any of the halachot of Bali Rei or Bali Matzeh. We can have chametz in our house. There's no Korban Pesach. All the halachot that we have about Pesach are not relevant for Pesach Sheni, right? So the only thing is that the people that bring the korban, okay, but they're much more halacha about Sukkot than about Pesach Sheni. So he doesn't. He has a bit of a kasha. So he explains that it must be a different explanation. He says it's not because of the volume of the laws, but because the mitzvah is now on the horizon, ba'oim ba'ofek, as we say in Hebrew. Meaning we need immediate focus on the halachot of Pesach. According to this Tzitz Eliezer, there really won't be a difference between Pesach and the other halachot and the other chagim, sorry. There are some achronim like the Chok Yaakov and others that say that it's because the Halachot of Pesach need preparation 30 days before. We can connect that to what the Tzitz Eliezer we just quoted in the name of the Tzitz Eliezer. According to these achronim, because we need to prepare the wheat and the bitul. And there's one of the achronim also that says that because someone who leaves their house 30 days before Pesach is obligated to clean the house from chametz, so we see there's already hachana needed to be done for Pesach 30 days before the Chag, and that's why that's where the 30 days comes from. But as we can see, the second explanation of the Bet Yosef is not that simple. The Taz is one who mentioned what I just said, the last explanation, which is because if someone who leaves the house, someone is going away for Pesach, but it leaves within 30 days before the Chag, has a halachic obligation to clean the house from chametz and to make sure there's no chametz or seor. So because of that, we have the halachot. So someone needs to start learning the halachot so they know this obligation. Anyway, Lemaaseh, the Shulchan Aruch in Orach Chaim Siman Tav Kaftet 429 rules that one must begin learning the laws of Pesach 30 days before. Now the Mishnah Berurah in Sharat Tziyun says that this isn't a halachic obligation like most halachot that we know, or like a strong minhag. It's a weaker halacha. Rav Ovadia and Chazon Ovadia, the first page over 1 in the volume about Pesach, he writes that Talmidei Chachamim have a regular sidrei limud, regular sidarim of learning. They can continue learning their regular stuff. Only those who have the burden of answering questions, again, the rabbi or the dayan, they must go over the halachot of Pesach. Okay, that is the first topic in our shiur. The next topic is a bit of a short one. It's the minhag of Kimcha de Pesach, which is mentioned in the same siman by the Rimlan. The makor is in the Talmud Yerushalmi, Masechet Bava Batra, chapter 1, halacha 4, where it discusses different obligations a community has towards the poor people in the community, and depends how long they have already lived in the community. So the Gemara there describes that someone poor and ani who's been living in the community for 12 months, the Kehila is obligated to provide him with wheat for the matzot, and this is brought by the Rema in our Siman. Mishnah Berurah goes into a bit of detail about which kind of ani and the specific needs, but the Grashaz Auerbach has an interesting chidush nowadays. It brings this down in Hilchot Shlomo about Pesach Perek Bet. He says today, because it isn't clear exactly which kind of ani needs to get Kimcha de Pesach, and it's not exactly clear what is the set amount, therefore one can even use their maaser money to give Kimcha de Pesach, and that is totally fine, and that is okay. Okay, that was our second topic. Third topic for this shiur is Tachanun in the month of Nissan. So in Masechet Sofrim, Chazal say in chapter 21, Perek Kaf Aleph, that the minhag is to not say Tachanun the entire month of Nissan. Where does this come from? So in Masechet Sofrim itself, it says like this. We know historically that the korbanot of the Nissim, the princes of the Shevatim, were brought for the first 12 days of Chodesh Nisan, and that brings us to Yud Gimel, right? So that's 2 days before Pesach, and then there is the 7 days of Pesach. That brings us to already 19 days of Chodesh Nisan we don't say Tachanun in them. So this is what is brought in Masechet Sofrim. So the Bet Yosef says, because the majority of the month is some kind of a Yom Tov, not really a Yom Tov, but it's a special time, and we don't say Tachanun, so the entire month already gets this different kedusha, and we don't say Tachanun the entire month. The tool is interesting. This probably isn't a halachic nafkamina, but the tool does mention that we don't nofel al apayim. We don't say Tachanun until after Isuchad. The Bet Yosef goes into discussion exactly what did the tool mean, but that's more for an iyun shiur, not for our purpose. Lemaaseh, the accepted custom by all the minhagim, Ashkenazim and Sfaradim, is that the entire Chodesh of Nisan we don't say Tachanun, no Nefilat Apayim, no Tzidkat and Mincha on Shabbat, no Hespedim, and of course public fast, Taniyot Tzivur, are also forbidden. That is topic number 3. Topic number 4 for this shiur was going to be Shabbat Ha'Gadol. So we're moving on to Siman, Taf Lamed 430, where the Shulchan Aruch just writes that the Shabbat before Pesach is called Shabbat Ha'Gadol. It is quite an interesting one. And some of the Achronim here ask, what is this halacha? It's no halacha. It's just hashkafa. What is the point of just telling us that the Shabbat has a name? So first of all, let's just go into the sources. So this is Tosfot in Masechet Shabbat, Daf Pei Zayin Amud Bet. They explain or bring the Masoret. There was a big miracle on this day in Egypt. What is this day? It's the 10th of Nissan, meaning Am Yisrael, we left Egypt on Tet B'Av, the 15th of Nissan, which that year was the Thursday. Why is this born in Shabbat? So the Gemara, they discussed about what day was Shavuot. So if you count the days back, so left Egypt on a Thursday, Tet B'Av. So that means that Yud Nissan, which is the day that Am Yisrael were ordered by Hashem to take the lamb, okay, and tie by their bed. That was the Shabbat before. And the Nesu, there was a massive miracle that the Egyptians saw us tying the lamb to our beds, but they were unable to protest. That is Shabbat Ha'Gadol. There is even a minhag brought by Maran Achida in his Pirush Shulchan Aruch in Machzik Bracha, where he says that the minhag is on Shabbat Ha'Gadol to not say Shabbat Shalom U'Barach, and say Shabbat Ha'Gadol Shalom U'Barach. So it's not much part of the name of the Shabbat. There is a discussion in the Achronim of why is this miracle then linked to Shabbat. This year, Pesach is on a Thursday, so Shabbat Ha'Gadol is Be'emet Yud Nissan. But in other years, if Pesach is not on a Thursday, then Shabbat Ha'Gadol is not Yud Nissan. So if we're celebrating Yud Nissan to the date, that Bnei Yisrael took the lamb, so why do we celebrate Shabbat? So there's three different ways to answer this. But the first two are divided into two. So the first answer is that on Yud Nissan there are other events, and we don't want to mix up the events. So there's two Achronim that go in this way. It's the Taz and the Magen Avraham, but each one brings a different event. The Taz says that the 10th of Nissan, Yud Nissan, is the day that Am Yisrael crossed the Jordan River. So if we cover the day to be on Yud Nissan, we might think that the nest of Yud Nissan is the miracle that happened to Yeshua and Bnei Yisrael when crossing the Jordan River, not the nest of Shabbat in Mitzrayim. Magen Avraham says, no, it's not that. It's the miracle of the Be'er of Miriam, and Miriam's well, which was also on the 10th of Nisan, and again, the same explanation. So that was explanation number one, again, divided into two. Explanation number two are Achronim that say this is to do because of the day of Shabbat, meaning the nest was connected to something to do with Shabbat. So Baal HaLevush, he says that it's because the taking of the lamb was on Shabbat, which is Muktzeh. It was Muktzeh, and the fact that the Egyptians couldn't protest, meaning we had to take it in front of the Egyptians, even though it was Shabbat, and then they couldn't protest. So being it on, the Egyptians knowing that it's Shabbat, it made their curiosity or maybe even their anger much larger, and even though they couldn't protest. So it says the Levush, that's what makes the miracle much more significant. The Baal HaPrisha says that Hashem told Bnei Yisrael to tie the lamb to the bed. You want to knot that it's going to be mitkayim for 5 days. It's a kesher shel kayama, and we're not allowed to take kesher shel kayama. It's a nisol deoraita. So they had to ke'ilu violate Shabbat in order to tie the lamb to the bed, and that was the connection to Shabbat. So that was answer number two. Again, two different direct ways in the Achronim. Aruch HaShulchan has a third direction, and that is that it's because there is a special link between Pesach and Shabbat. Shabbat is a testimony on the creation of the world, and Pesach is testimony to the hashgacha that Hashem has on the Metziut, and the fondness that we, Am Yisrael, have in Hashem's eyes. And one can't stand without the other, says Aruch HaShulchan. And that's why we always remember the nest of Yud Nissan on Shabbat Ha'Gadol. And the Maaseh, all those reasons are interesting, but it's Pachot Meshaneh, because there is a bit of halacha, even though Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring any halacha. The Rema adds that the minhag in Ashkenaz is to cite the Magid, the Haggadah, on Shabbat Ha'Gadol after Mincha. Different explanations the Achronim to how as to why, and different explanations in the Achronim to what do we do if let us say there's a Motzei Shabbat, and what we say the Haggadah on Shabbat afternoon and again in the evening, but seeming that this year that's not relevant, We're not going to get into that today. Adkan, this shiur with Hashem. In the next shiur, our second one, we'll start getting into the halachot mamash, the bastar of Pesach, bedika, bitul, biur chametz, and all of that. With Hashem next time.